Today we're going to return to practices we haven't done for a little while. They're my favourite practices, but that doesn't mean anything. It just means I like them. And they're sort of what I call, or what people call, objectless mindfulness, or natural awareness, or non-dual awareness. And there's a difference in these practices to normal mindfulness, for example. So in normal mindfulness, well, actually, let's take one step back. In concentration, we focus very much on just one object, don't we? The breath, a mantra, candle, whatever. Yeah, that's concentration. In mindfulness, we broaden that into a more open noticing of all objective experiences. So that might be everything about our breath, everything about our body, or everything about everything that we are aware of. But all of those things are objects, whether they're things inside my head or if they're things outside my head. They're still objects. A thought is an object, it's an experience, and that pen is an object. So I'm aware of all of them, or I can notice them all. And that's what we would call more open mindfulness practice. But moving further from that, because I suppose ultimately the pursuit is to understand what we really are, and then we'll stop making all these mistakes about how we interact with the world and other people. We can move beyond normal mindfulness, so experiential mindfulness, if you like, and we can start to relax into something called objectless mindfulness or non-dual awareness. And in those practices, we start to drop the objects. So our focus doesn't become the objects, whether the objects are the breath and the thoughts and the pen or the sounds or whatever. We start to drop the objects, and instead the focus becomes the subject. Yeah, and the subject is the thing that is aware of all objects. At its simplest, you've got a subject and you've got an object. I know that there is a pen there. That I refer to is the subject that knows the pen. So in effortless mindfulness or non-dual awareness, we turn towards this I, which is like the ultimate quest, really, if you like, in all traditions. Who is this I that we're always talking about? What is this I? If I know what this I is, I'll start to understand things properly. So there are three elements to it which we'll incorporate today. You could say there's relaxing, so relaxing effort or softening effort, because I often talk about the fact we only need to scratch just below the surface. We don't need to dive deep to find this thing. It's there already. There's broadening our awareness or our knowing, yeah, so we're not stuck on one thing. And then there's this relaxing away from objects. You could say, yeah, so relaxing our attention away from objective things. So I'm going to guide you through a session of that. Don't worry, as I said before, not all practices will work for all people. If it works and it seems useful, then that's great. If something yesterday seemed far more useful, or Monday, then that's fab. We just try all sorts of things, and gradually different things will start to click. Awesome. Right, so settle down, make yourself comfy. That was my 4 minutes. Don't go over 4 minutes. Make sure you're warm enough. And we will start with concentration and then mindfulness, and then we'll start to dissolve into effortless mindfulness or non-objective mindfulness. So first of all, just find your focus for a concentration, just to ground yourself down. So you might notice that you're a little bit jumpy or skittish, or however you want to phrase it, but that your attention is bouncing around plans for the rest of the day, mental to-do lists, so on and so on. And that's obviously perfectly normal. That's how we engage with the world normally. So at first we have to make a bit of effort to actually just steady ourselves. So we find an anchor. be our breath, might be the sound of my voice or sounds outside. And we tie ourselves to that anchor, or we tether ourselves to that anchor so that we don't float away. And if we do feel that we're floating away, if we're losing track of where we are, we simply come back to our anchor and pull ourselves tightly back towards it. So this stage of the practice involves the most effort by far. Because it's a remembering, we have to remember one moment to the next to stay with our anchor. And you'll still find that you float off, still find that you get disturbed by thoughts, glued to them, and that's just normal. So we're very kind to ourselves. We don't have any judgment because we know that's why we're practicing. So hopefully our concentration has steadied us. Now that we've found a stable center, we can start expanding that very tight focus into a more open, relaxed noticing of all objects. So we go from concentrating on one small thing, be it the breath or the sensations or my voice, and like a very small point of light, expanding outwards into a much broader floodlight. Our noticing or our knowing starts to dissolve over everything that we know. There'll be sensations in the body, but try not to focus too tightly on one dominant area. There will be a whole range of sounds, from very faint to very clear. Try not to seek any of them out or single them out. There will be a whole spectrum of mind activity or internal experiences, from very subtle feelings through to very obsessive thoughts. And again, try not to single any one activity or be selective. Just notice that there's a whole range of internal experience. And if you find that all of a sudden you're stuck to something, you've selected something by accident, just come back to your anchor for a few moments, recenter yourself, and then it will be quite easy to expand outwards. So just observing all objective experiences coming and going. Waves passing over you, passing through you. Relax your effort as you soften your shoulders, soften any tension in the body. You'll also notice that you stop trying so hard. There's nothing that needs to be done in this practice. We're not doing anything at all. It's just a constant feeling we have that something needs to be done. We notice that even when we're not doing at this moment, We don't vanish. We are very clearly still present. Now we start to gently let go of the objects and look for what is behind them. At first, we might notice that there is a silence behind the sounds. There's a silence in between one sound and another. That silence is a very subtle object. Much more subtle than the sounds are, because it has no content. We might shift to the stillness behind the movement of our mind, or the stillness between the thoughts that arise. And instead of looking or noticing the thoughts, we notice the stillness where the thinking subsides and settles. And again, that stillness or that emptiness is a very subtle object. There's still a sense of me observing it, but it's much more subtle than the thoughts or the emotions. And that stillness or that emptiness is always there, even behind the thoughts when they appear. Feels as if we're progressively softening our effort at every stage, doing less and less. Can't even be good at this or be bad at this. That's not possible in the framework of just knowing. And now we take one final step backwards, even softening our grip on the silence and the stillness. We turn our awareness completely around just to see if there's a glimpse of the awareness itself. Can we rest back just in the knowing? Can the knowing know itself? Can the observer observe observation? It might feel for a moment as if you're looking everywhere, but you can't find it. And that's correct, because it isn't a thing. But in this effort to find awareness or find the knowing, what we're really doing is turning away from all objects, all objective experience. So now just let the awareness or the knowing or the observer notice the breath again. Breath may have completely vanished and not existed for a few moments, but there it is, waiting for us. Maybe just taking 4 or 5 slightly more wakeful, energetic breaths upwards from 0, and allowing each one of those breaths to just flood through your physical body, slowly bringing awareness to your extremities, your hands and feet. Might start to feel a little movement coming back as you notice the ground underneath you, space around you. Very clearly aware of my voice again. Oh, and if you need to, you can take a stretch, rub your hands together, rub your face, and just remembering that after we've done a long practice like this, it'll always take a while just to sort of wake up from this sort of slightly dreamy state. That's perfectly normal. Generally passes after a cup of tea. So that was quite a progressive dropping, I suppose, practice. So we went through pretty much every stage from concentration through mindfulness into much more subtle mindfulness, where we start to drop the obvious objects, and then finally sort of trying to turn around and look at the subject, so looking away from all objects. Yeah, some of that might have made sense, some of that might have clicked, some of it might not. I wouldn't worry about that. The practice is what's important, just doing it. Well, can't do it, but practicing. But yeah, if there's any questions, I'll pick it up again on Friday. Okay, there's more to explore. But sometimes there's questions about this sort of thing. But if there are, I'll hang around. Yeah. If not, I'll see you on Friday.
I'll probably send you a message down, but it's funny. Someone mentioned in a recovery meeting last Thursday non-duality, and they were trying to explain it, and I couldn't get my head around it. And it's really weird that you've like today covered it, and sort of now I understand what it is. So yeah, I'll probably send you a little message after. But that was, I just felt I was nothing at the end almost.
Hey, well, you are nothing, Jude. We are like no thing. That is literally in Buddhism they'd say that's our gross misunderstanding. We imagine ourselves to be all these different things, which they call the 5 aggregates. It's not important what those are, but we are. That's our mistake. We're not things. We are very clearly some. I have to use language. We are very clearly something that isn't a thing. We're always confined by words, which makes it hard to talk about non-duality, which is why so many people make it quite confusing. Maybe not because they don't have the experience of it, or maybe they don't. I don't know. But yeah, the actual language we use around it is very difficult because we trip ourselves up all the time.
Yeah, I think they'd only just heard about it, and they were like, "Oh my God, it was like a revelation." Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's great. It's great. But it can be very hard to talk about, not non-things, basically. It's like, how do you talk about something that's not a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, good. Lovely. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome.